but I'm always in hope of having a positive response from the U.S. authorities.
Exact numbers of migrants in custody expected later today. The Homeland Security Department has said lawlessness will not be tolerated.
A new form of genetic test is raising serious questions of ethics.
A New Jersey firm, Genomic Prediction, has developed genetic tests to determine whether embryos have certain conditions, such as the risk of some diseases, but also lower intelligence. The company is already negotiating with in vitro fertilization companies to use the tests on embryos being screened for implantation. Dr. David Prentice of the Charlotte Lozier Institute tells AFN, science once said it wouldn't happen, couldn't be done.
Well, now you see that people are pushing the envelope, not just to measure your intelligence, but to measure it through your DNA, and essentially to slot you even from the beginning of your life, when you're still an embryo.
He says the obvious result is that embryos will be destroyed if they don't measure up to someone's idea of a high enough IQ. But Prentice cautions there is a problem with accuracy.
In fact, one of the scientists themselves have said that they only can predict really somewhere around about 5% of what your IQ might be. They're not able to look at all the environmental factors that might affect you, and they call their predictions at this point fuzzy.
Prentice adds another scary thought is that the method is using science to create designer babies. Already tests are being used to determine whether preborn babies or embryos in IVF labs lean towards certain genetic problems, such as Down syndrome, and doctors encouraging then abortion, not giving the unborn baby the chance to live. I'm Charlie Buck.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Let me tell you what happens in most of the southern border is that in the middle of the night, a sensor goes off on a trail leading from Mexico to the United States, and a border patrol agent stands on that trail waiting to take that on. Doesn't know if it's an illegal alien for a job or a drug smuggler has a lot of guns. We've had border patrol agents killed on that border. While we slept last night and had dinner with our families and watched football, these brave men and women are on the border.
If we find that it's uncontrollable, Josh, if we find that it gets to a level where we are going to lose control or where people are going to start getting hurt, we will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control.
The entire border?
The whole border.
President Trump set to make 2 campaign stops in Mississippi today for Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith ahead of tomorrow's Senate runoff election. The president tweeting about Hyde-Smith, quote, "We need her in Washington." So what exactly is at stake in Mississippi?
Cindy has voted with me 100% of the time. She's always had my back. She's always had your back. And a vote for Cindy is a vote for me and make America great again.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm back. You were maybe wondering where I was. Well, I was right here, but not in this particular space because I had some time off. It was Thanksgiving, and we were so excited about Thanksgiving. And when I say we, really honestly, I think my husband and the kids were normal level of excitement. I was like extra super excited. And so consequently, you know, I told you about my adventures with our double oven and all of that stuff. But in spite of all of that, God showed up and showed out, and we had a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday. And I had some time off, which was just like energizing. It was so good. And now we're back. And so we have a jam-packed program for you today. We are going to be speaking with Peter Wallison. He's a senior fellow over at the American Enterprise Institute. He's the author of Judicial Fortitude, The Last Chance to Rein in the Administrative State. He's going to join us to talk about that book and about how Congress has really abdicated their duty to maintain the constitutionally guaranteed representative republic. It's not a democracy. It's a republic that we currently enjoy. So what we want to do is talk with him. We'll have him in the second segment. We're also going to be talking about this big, it's still a story. And I'm kind of surprised by the legs of this. And when I say that, I'm speaking from the position of having lost a school board election. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, how does losing school board compare with losing a gubernatorial election? Well, in some people's minds, it doesn't compare. But it does give me a little bit of an insider peek into what it feels like to knock those doors and run a campaign and really have a lot of people relying on you to win and then to come up short. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Stacey Abrams, she's embarrassing herself. And then we are also obviously going to talk about the trending story of the day. The Gallup polling shows that even more so than ever before, the illegal immigration situation is the number one thing that Americans would really like to see rectified. And so we're going to talk about that, the president's threats to possibly close the border permanently, to possibly close the border indefinitely, all in response to this horde of migrants that have arrived at the southern border and are really, they're planning on coming in here whether you like it or not. And so we're also going to talk about independent abortion clinics in the U.S. closing at an unprecedented rate, and a California agency taking 9 years to create a fire map, and how PG&E in California has actually, they bear a huge amount of responsibility for what we're seeing in the way of the wildfires, and especially the Camp Fire. And when we look at the loss of life and the death toll there, we're in perilous times because lobbyists and government types have really taken over. They've got a grip, a stranglehold on certain parts of the government, especially in California. And now we're seeing people die. And so a lot of times you hear people say, especially on MSNBC and CNN, they'll say, people are going to die. If you don't let migrants in, they'll die. If you don't start saying men or women, people are going to die. If you name any old crazy thing, they'll say, well, if you don't do it, then people are going to die. Well, the truth is that if we don't start to figure out how to decouple the lobbyists and PG&E from the people who make the decisions about what to do about fire remediation and really the preventative steps, not after there's already a blaze, but beforehand, years before that, the planning and the execution of trimming and keeping vegetation away from power lines, et cetera, that has to happen before the fire, or there will be fires, and then what? Who's being held accountable is my question. Who's going to be brought up before congressional hearings and charged with being responsible for the deaths of all of these people? Who's going to be held responsible for the fact that they don't have enough highway out there in California for people to properly evacuate because they're so busy preserving the wildlife for some special spotted toad and all that stuff? There's a lot here, a lot that needs to be unpacked. So we'll get into that. And then, of course, you may have heard, but I'm celebrating the fact that Mexico has finally woke up and smelled the coffee, and they're planning on deporting approximately 500 migrants for storming the U.S. border in Tijuana. Now, here's why that's important. They have, previous to this, just waved at migrants as they pass through their country. Oh, you're heading up to, well, stop in and have a bite to eat. Spend some of you have any money? Do you need some flip-flops? You need some sandals? We respect you. Okay, adios. Now they're going to have to start taking responsibility for the fact that they're basically the superhighway for people from south of their country to get into our country. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. We've got to put a stop to it. So now I want to get into our daily encouragement. And today's daily encouragement is Psalm 90:12. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I think this scripture is so important for today. And look at my cool little scripture card that I got off of. If you're watching the live stream, or I might take a screen grab of this, put it up on Instagram. This is a little scripture card. I've got a bunch of these. They're so cute. And I bought them on Amazon from a woman who she makes these, and then you can buy them in little packs and you can share them with friends. I tape them to my daughter's dashboard when she comes home to visit. So they're really cool. I should share the link. I'll share the link on the Facebook page. And by the way, at Stacey on the Right on Twitter and Instagram, AFR.net and UrbanFamilyTalk.com. So teach us to number our days. So what's the point here? Well, I think probably people in California who are currently living in Walmart parking lots might wish that the PG&E representatives and the government types who are responsible for creating the fire maps might have numbered their days. In other words, taken their responsibilities seriously and actually applied themselves to the task at hand, the task they were assigned and paid to do, the thing that they are responsible for, the thing that they should be held responsible for not doing, which is creating the fire maps. Now, this applies to us in every area of our lives, and we all, my fingers up in the air because I am just as guilty as anyone else, have some area in our life where we're like, I'm not sure what I should do here, or I don't know how to handle this, or this problem's too big, or whatever the case might be. You're not exactly up to snuff where you need to be in that area. When it comes to the work that we're assigned and paid to do, when we don't do that work, other people are impacted. But more than that, if you're working in a place where you're supposed to create a fire map, and then that fire map is going to be used to help with remediation to make sure that there aren't fires, then your lack of due diligence, your refusal to do your job that you're paid to do, actually results in people dying, people losing everything that they've worked so hard to accumulate over the years. And, you know, we all know we're just travelers here. We're just passing through. But that doesn't mean you should not take care and do your work and other people lose their homes. That doesn't make that okay. There is no excuse for what we're seeing out in California, and we're seeing it in Washington, D.C., what we're seeing at the southern border. When you look around this country, of an epidemic of people who have a job that they're assigned to do, and instead of doing that, they're taking gifts from lobbyists. They're going on trips paid for by lobbyists. They're maybe receiving extra contracts or promises of more lucrative jobs when they leave Congress, when they leave that elected position, when they're no longer the county executive or the municipal executive, when they're no longer the mayor, when they're no longer the director over fire maps. These people and so many other millions of Americans who aren't doing their jobs, it means other people will die. When you look at the list of illegal immigrant crime, kidnappings, rapes, murders, violent assaults, drug dealing, those are the result of people in this country who are tasked with a certain job to do, refusing to do what they've been paid to do. That goes for Congress. And so in a lot of ways, and I know this is not popular, and if you're going to email me, my only warning for you is that if you send me a nasty email or a condescending email, what I do is I blacklist your IP address. So I do read it, so you will get your point across to me, but then I'll never hear from you again because your stuff will automatically be directed to my junk, not the junk folder that I clean out, but the one that I never see. So just be careful if you're planning on criticizing things that I say on the show, that you do so in a direct but kind manner, because if I sense unkindness, condescension, or if you go full liberal moron and you insult me or threaten me, you're getting blacklisted. So I never hear from you again. And it's really, so you haven't bothered me at all. Okay, PSA aside, we're talking about a serious situation. And it's all over the country. It's everywhere. And so what can we do? We can number our days. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Also, so that we won't be held accountable for people dying because we did or didn't do something we were supposed to do. And then, because people think they're getting away. The executives at PG&E aren't getting away. The people who work in those government agencies in California, they're not getting away. They may never be held accountable here on this earth for what they've done. Same with congressional members who refuse to fund the border wall, who refuse to do something about the Flores decision, who refuse to reform our immigration system so that it accurately reflects what Americans want, which is less legal immigration and the end to illegal immigration. When they don't do what they're supposed to do and they think they've gotten away with it here, the Bible also says we're not to covet the wicked. We're not to covet what they have, and we're not to look at them longingly and say, wow, I wish I could get away with that, because no one is getting away with anything. The judgment seat is real. It's at the end of your life, and it's going to be there for every single person, whether you believe or not, whether you are in the game or not, whether you read the scripture or not, whether you go to church or not. No matter what it is that you think you're doing, you think you're getting away with, you think you're putting the wool over somebody's eyes, no one is fooled. God is not mocked. If you're responsible for people dying and losing their homes and losing everything they've worked for, if you're responsible for that, you will be held to account. So the best thing to do is address ourselves to the word, teach us to number our days. That's where we just pray to God and say, Father, please Don't let me be responsible for anybody losing anything or their lives. God, please teach me to number my days. Please give me a heart of wisdom. And please show me where I am down and out, where I'm lacking, where there are holes, where I'm not meeting the mark, so I can meet it, because I want to meet you at the judgment seat and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. Here is your reward. That's what you want to hear. Because it's going to be a rude awakening for those who think they're getting away with something. And we can't be happy about that, because we're talking about eternity here. Yes, the lives and the possessions, a tragedy, but eternity, that's the real game. That's the real deal. So who knows the power of your anger? Your wrath matches the fear you are due. So teach us to number our days, that we may present a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord. How long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Deuteronomy 32:29 says, if only they were wise, they would understand it. They would comprehend their fate. Don't be those people. If you're not where you need to be in your responsibilities, especially if you are a public servant and people's lives rest on what you do, repent and begin to do your job correctly. God's word says he will restore what the locusts have eaten. The time that is behind you is behind you. Step forward and do your job now, because there is no escaping the accountability for your job. There is no escaping it. You may for a moment experience the relief of feeling as if you have not been held accountable, or if it's not your fault. You may convince yourself of that. You may be able to look yourself in the eye in the mirror, but you're still going to be held responsible. And I think it is absolutely ludicrous, but it's also a result of the people of California. And God bless the Republicans and conservatives out there who are doing their best to try to elect God-fearing people. But the people of California have made a decision that they're going to go with ungodly leadership and people who lie for a living. And now the repercussions of that are coming back 10,000-fold. And it is so disheartening to watch. Let's not be those people. Let's be responsible and number our days. When we get back, we're going to have Peter Wallison. Stay right there.
Every day in preborn centers across the country, young women in crisis find refuge. Here's Roxy, nurse director for preborn at the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Southern California.
A lot of them come to us and they feel rejected, they feel alone, they're in a crisis situation, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to start. We believe that sharing the compassionate love of Jesus Christ is what really makes what we do work.
Through love and compassion, young women facing tough situations get to meet Jesus Christ and their unborn baby on ultrasound.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and you'll receive a story and a picture of babies' lives that were spared. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. My youngest son, Brendan, is a tremendous baseball player. In fact, he had many scholarship opportunities after high school. He could have gone on to play baseball at a number of different schools. Karen and I noticed that in the last part of his junior year in high school and all through his senior year, he developed a real passion for evangelism. God used Brendan to share his faith with a number of his friends in school, and many of them trusted Christ as their Lord and Savior. So it was no surprise when Brendan came to me in his senior year and said, Dad, I believe God has called me to lay baseball on the altar. He went on to study at Moody Bible Institute, preparing for full-time Christian work. God calls us to place everything before him as a sacrifice, an act of worship. Nothing in this life belongs to us, including our plans for the future, our gifts, our talents, our hopes, and our dreams. They're all on loan from God. Listen to these straightforward words in John chapter 12, verses 24 and 25. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life and loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Did you hear that perspective? Jesus says that we must never come to him asking him simply to endorse what we want to do. God calls us to embrace the obscurity that Jesus had to embrace so that we can produce heaven's results. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Don't fight God's call to lay aside your interests and ambitions for the sake of Christ and his kingdom. It's a sacrifice that's worth making.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. It's fantastic. It's Monday, and I'm so excited to speak to our next guest. We are going to be chatting right now with Peter Wallison, Senior Fellow from American Enterprise Institute, author of Judicial Fortitude, The Last Chance to Rein in the Administrative State. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Stacy. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I'm excited about talking to you about your new book because we just, in the first segment, we're talking about the responsibility that people have to execute their jobs. And we see all over the country the fruits of people not doing their jobs well. And in your book, you explain how rulemaking by unelected officials and the lack of oversight by Congress and the judiciary branch have resulted in an administrative state. Why did you write this book?
Well, I've been very concerned about the direction the government has been going for quite a while. We are a democratic republic, which, as the framers developed it, was intended to be guided by the people through Congress. The people were supposed to vote for their representatives in Congress. The representatives in Congress would then make the laws, and those laws would be enforced or executed by the executive branch. And that's the way it ought to be. But the way it has turned out is that Congress has been delegating a lot of authority to the executive agencies. And those agencies have basically been making the rules we're living under. Now, the agencies are not elected. If we continue to have this structure in this country, we are headed further and further away from a democratic republic toward a system in which unelected officials are making the rules for us. So we have to find a way to stop this, to bring it back to a point where Congress is making the laws and the agencies are simply executing them, not making the rules themselves.
So I'm right there with you. I think the book is very timely, and it's something that Americans should really, we must acquaint ourselves with this, because without oversight, most things kind of go to pot pretty quickly, if you know what I mean. Like, if no one's looking out to find out, is this person doing what they're supposed to do? Is this agency doing what they're supposed to do? Is this program that was funded and is going on indefinitely actually doing what it was stood up to do? And so there are a few things that you mentioned in the book, specifically the Supreme Court's 1984 Chevron v. NRDC decision. Can you explain that to the listeners?
Yeah, that decision was a very important one, probably one of the most important since the New Deal in the 30s. And what the court said there was that when a lower court, one of the lower courts, is confronting an agency that is arguing that it has the power to make a certain rule, the court should defer to the agency's judgment on that question if the court thinks the agency is acting reasonably. Now, that turns the whole idea of what the judiciary is supposed to be about on its head, because basically the courts should be making the decision about what the laws that Congress has made have conferred on agencies, what kinds of powers the agencies have received from the laws Congress has made. The agencies themselves should not be making that decision. Obviously, anyone who is a judge, in a sense, a judge in his own case, can't be want as much power as they can get, and if they can interpret the laws that Congress has given them in the most open-ended way, they will have more power. So that's the so-called Chevron decision. And one of the things that the Supreme Court can do today to stop the constant growth of these agencies and their power is to reverse or eliminate the so-called Chevron decision. Now, we are very fortunate right now because we have 5 people on the court who are constitutionalists, and that includes the 2 who were appointed by President Trump. This is Neil Gorsuch, and, of course, Brett Kavanaugh. They have been added to the 3 who were already there, and I think that they would be prepared to make this very major change in the jurisprudence that covers the agencies right now.
So I'm excited to see them there as well. They seem as if they're of a more classical kind of view of the Constitution. They really don't see it as a living, breathing document. And with those 2, my hope is that they would actually drag the court further to the right and kind of temper the influence of Justice Roberts, who is definitely a conservative, but is much more like he's drifted to the left a little bit. And by the left, obviously, it's the middle for him. But we don't need another a Kennedy. What we really need is solidly Republican-minded judges who are going to see the Constitution and really judge based on what the Constitution says and what the founders meant the judiciary branch to actually have control over. So how does this administrative state overall, how does it undermine our representative democracy? When we talk about it in this way, this representative republic, I hate even using the term democracy. When we're talking about that, we see the effects of it all over our country, but maybe we don't connect it to the fact that we don't have control over the administrative state.
Well, I think many people who are perhaps listening to your program, but many people throughout the country have found that their property, for example, is subject to regulations from the federal government that they had no way to affect. For example, the Clean Water Act gives the Environmental Protection Agency a tremendous amount of power to control how rather small bodies of water, including farm ponds and streams and things like that, are maintained. And people are puzzled by that, but the reason that has happened is that Congress, instead of debating and approving this kind of thing, which would give people an opportunity for input to express their own views about it, handed over to this executive agency, the EPA, the power to make these decisions. And so when people complain to their congressmen or their senators about the fact that some of their property is burdened by these kinds of rules, they're told, well, I didn't do that. I didn't vote for that. The agency did that. But the agency was only acting under authority that was given to them by Congress. And so what we have to do is make sure that that Congress, when it provides these powers to agencies, limits them appropriately and provides only the powers that the American people have voted for. If that isn't the way our system is going to work, then we are going to have not a Democratic or Republican or a representative system, as you would call it. We are going to have a system in which the rules are made by a group of people who live around Washington, D.C., have their own priorities, but those priorities are not the priorities of the people of the United States.
So let's talk about these priorities. So let's say we've seen President Trump roll back the waters of the United States rule or whatever that was with you got a little pond on your property and the government's telling you can't drain it off or fill it in. He's rolled that back, and thank God for it. But how do we, as citizens, what practical steps can we take to solve the problem in besides just electing people who say they want to do something about it? What else can we do?
Well, the important thing is to understand how the problem can be solved, and that's why I wrote the book. Because the book explains, I believe, in a way that people will understand, that the only way to solve this problem is to get the Supreme Court on the side of interpreting the laws the way they were written and not as administrative agencies wish to have them interpreted. And if we can get enough people in support of that simple idea, the court can do it. Because the way the system works, if the Supreme Court makes a decision, all the lower courts have to abide by that decision. And it might take some time for everyone to fall into place. But once the Supreme Court makes the decision, as they did in the Chevron case, the wrong decision in my view, all the other courts started to follow it over time. So the only way that we can get this done is to have the Supreme Court say that all laws made by Congress must be interpreted in the first instance by the lower courts. The lower courts have to interpret the language that Congress used and make sure that the agencies do not go beyond that language. If we can get that done, then we have a way of reducing the number of regulations and rules that are coming out of these agencies every year. In fact, over the last 25 years, since 1993, in every year, the agencies have issued more than 3,000 rules and regulations, for a total of over 101,000 rules and regulations in that period. No one can possibly know all the regulations and rules that we now live under, because the agencies continue to put out these regulations and rules because this is what they think is good for the American people. But the American people have not decided that that's good for them. It's the agencies who are deciding, and they're unelected.
So I think a lot of Americans have a idea of how that's working, and I think one of the things that's most frightening about it is when we see, in any kind of movement to change it, and you see people who work for the government kind of they kind of form together in one of those sci-fi conglomerates like a Unimind, and they vote to maintain their power. This is this problem is huge. It's why you wrote the book. Obviously, it's a problem that needs addressing, but is it really just getting a couple more conservatives on the Supreme Court, and is this on the kind of the radar of the current Republican administration?
Well, if enough people read the book and write to their congressmen and senators about the book, I think it will be. I have great hope that there are these 5 constitutionalists. And incidentally, let me talk about Roberts here for a minute because you mentioned him. I know there's a lot of skepticism about what he has done, but there are 2 different ways that the court operates. First, it interprets the laws and it interprets the Constitution on the one side. On the other, it interprets the structure of the Constitution, and that is the separation of powers. And what we are talking about here is the separation of powers between the legislature and the executive. And what the judiciary is supposed to do is make sure that that separation of powers is preserved. And if we can get the court, and I talk especially about Roberts here, because in recent cases he has said that it is important for the court to make sure that the various branches stay within their assigned roles and not go outside it. And what he means by that is that Congress should not be delegating to the agencies, to the executive branch, any powers that the framers wanted kept in Congress, which is the power to make the laws. So Roberts may have made the wrong decisions from many people's perspective on some of the things that interpreted laws, such as the ACA, the Obamacare. But on the question of the structure of the Constitution, he seems to be very firm. And that's where the changes that I'm talking about in the book would occur. The court would make sure that Congress continues to make the laws, the judiciary interprets the laws, and the executive only enforces or executes the laws that Congress actually adopts.
Fantastic. Well, I think people can definitely see why this is an important book, why you wrote it, and why we should all take this task and add it to our to-do list, which is to contact our congressmen and let them know, hey, we need oversight. We need more constitutional judges, and we need you guys to fulfill your duties. They're down on the job and they're not getting it done. But you are, and we really appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about your new book, Judicial Fortitude, The Last Chance to Rein in the Administrative State. Peter Wallison, thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you, Stacey, and good luck.
All right, thank you. I'm with him. That's a fantastic kind of second point, or addition to what I was talking about in the first segment. We're going to be held accountable. We have no escape. There is no escaping it. And I think it's like you're putting two angry hands around your own neck when you say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run for Congress, or I'm going to go get elected to some position. And then you get there, and instead of executing your duties, you spend your time enriching yourself and having fun and, jet setting around with people who have more money than you do. And before you know it, your term is almost up and it's time to run for re-election, and now you owe a whole bunch of people. So instead of being able to go back to your home district and say, hey, look, I ran on this, I said I was going to do these 12 things, I did 8, or I did 6, or I did 2, whatever you did, and then here's the other ones I want to work on. If you send me back, I'm still working on this stuff. Instead, they come back and they're like, government's too big. That's why it's part of the reason that the House of Representatives under Republican control was effective in a couple of areas, but largely ineffective in the areas that the president ran on. And a bunch of people retired because they knew they couldn't play ball in the new game. The new setting it wasn't a setting they could work in. So they retired. I'm glad to see them go. But the American people also spoke. You don't get to keep that job if you're not going to do what you ran on. When we get back, we'll have your calls. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. It's not getting a ton of attention, but the wall at our southern border is actually under construction. Arizona will have 32 miles of short, ineffective vehicle barrier replaced in April of 2019. This replacement wall will stop pedestrians and vehicles from illegally crossing our border. Another area under construction in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas will add 18 miles of new wall to stop illegal entrance, finally filling in those wide open spaces. Environmental laws are the main hindrances against utilizing the $1.5 billion allocated by Congress to move forward with wall completion. Under the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, DHS can waive all legal requirements if needed. It's good to finally see some movement forward. The Republican-controlled Congress must fully fund completion of the border wall at the president's requested amount of $25 billion during the lame duck session. It's the least they could do. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
The week ahead.
Listen up, shoppers. Didn't get enough on Black Friday? Get your credit cards ready because we start the week off with Cyber Monday. The term was coined back in 2005, and every year Americans continue to spend more and more. If you'd like to get the Christmas cheer started before December, the famous Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lights up Wednesday in New York City. Topping this year's holiday tree is a spectacular Swarovski star, the 9-foot, 4-inch showstopper covered with 3 million Swarovski crystals. Live performances will be from 7 until 9 p.m. Eastern. Expected to perform Diana Ross, Tony Bennett, and John Legend. And chocolate fans are in for a treat this week. Thursday is National Chocolates Day. Milk, dark, white, have it all. History shows reports of solid chocolate appearing around 1829. Before that, chocolate only existed as a bitter beverage and was not sweetened. First chocolate bar made its debut back in 1847. And that's a look at this week's short but festive week ahead. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All right, how important is Mississippi? Then I got to roll. The Senate race.
If you care about judges, you care about tax cuts, you care about a strong military, vote for the Republican. The Democrats are going to take us backward, the Republicans keep us on track.
Welcome back to the show. That's Lindsey Graham telling Sean Hannity that, we got to definitely, not let this whole thing go down the way we think it's going down. So I'm really pleased with the way the president has been able to work around a ineffective Congress who refuses to do anything, and the laws that are arrayed against him, the same laws that George Bush and Barack Obama operated under, and nobody had a problem. But now because it's Donald Trump, it's like, catastrophe. Everybody's going to die. Yeah, no one. Yeah, people are maybe going to die if they're breaking the law and they get into these melees. One person was killed over the weekend down at the southern border, but that wasn't due to people dying because of something that Americans did wrong. So call lines are open, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. While we're working on callers, if there are any on a Monday, we want to get to this story about Stacey Abrams. Now, you might be saying, well, she lost, so what? Who cares what she says? But I think this is really important because we see this over and over and over again. We love Ann Coulter here on the show. She's been on the show before. And she was making the point recently that this is a Democratic tactic. It's a tactic that the Democrats often use. When they lose a race, they say that the race was illegitimate. When they win, it's a mandate. It's a blue wave. It's a tidal wave. It's a smackdown. It's people coming to their senses. They have really great marketing, but it's not true. We're now looking at Governor Kemp. He's Governor-elect Kemp. He has bested Stacey Abrams by 50,000 votes, if I'm getting this right. She is here talking to Jake Tapper, and I want you to listen to this because it's instructive for all of us. We can get carried away. I don't care what your political persuasion is. I don't care if you're a Bible-believing Christian, praise God. If you're not, come join us. The water's fine. Any person who's a human being with a beating heart, hot-blooded, whether you're American, French, you could be any nationality, we can all get carried away. It has nothing to do with politics. We can get so into what we're doing and really into ourselves that we get carried away. And that's what we're hearing here with her. She's not ready to let the spotlight go. She's not ready for the cameras to turn off or turn to someone else or something else. She's intimately interested in continuing to be the center of attention. Not only that, but she has no reckoning for what she would do after if she lost. And this is important. When you're running for office, whether it's, elected sheriff or, head of your PTA or PTO or governor of the great state of Georgia, you have to have a plan for if you lose. Let's say you lose. So are you saying your life is over? Stacey Abrams, did you have any friends? Did you have any joy in your life? Did you have a family? Did you have a career? Were you a person before you started running for this position? If so, why can't you go back to being that person? Or are you the only person who could ever be the governor of Georgia? Once you ran, you basically locked that position down. No one else can hold that spot. Listen to her embarrassing herself with Jake Tapper. It's number 4.
The law as it stands says that he received an adequate number of votes to become the governor of Georgia. And I acknowledge the law as it stands. I am a lawyer by training, and I am someone who's taken a constitutional oath to uphold the law. But we know sometimes the law does not do what it should, and that something being legal does not make it right. This is someone who has compromised our systems. He's compromised our democratic systems, and that is not appropriate. And therefore, my mission is going to be to make certain no one else has to face this conversation. Going forward, we are going to ensure that there are fair fights in the state of Georgia, and that voter protection is more than a slogan, that it is actually a common cause that cuts across partisanship. Because as I said, there are Republicans who were harmed, Democrats who were harmed, independents who were harmed, and that is wrong in one of the original 13 colonies, one of the founding blocks of our democracy, and I want Georgia to be better.
Georgia has to be better. And the only way Georgia can be better is if she keeps on acting like the election wasn't held and it wasn't legitimate, and that she's got to do something about it. So Jake Tapper didn't fall for it. You know, sometimes he's just dead on. I want you to listen to him ask her. This is an important question for her to acknowledge, because this is what sent Democrats over the edge when they thought Donald Trump running against Hillary Clinton, that she might win and he might say, no, you didn't. They were so scared he might do that because they knew it would throw the country into turmoil and that it would be the wrong thing. And he was talking about voter fraud, which is a real thing and it's a legitimate concern. But when he brought it up, it was not legitimate. Do you see the double standard there? See, I'd be fine with it if you're fine with people questioning the results of an election, and it's okay if Republicans do it and it's okay with Democrats do it, then, you know, go ahead and hold that opinion. If you're not okay with anyone questioning the legitimacy of an election because an election is an election and it's done and it's over, and if you won, you won, if you lost, you lost, I'm fine with that too. But you can't say it's perfectly fine for Democrats to question the result of an election and to promise to fight to change laws so that this never happens again. In other words, so that no Republican ever beats a Democrat again. Or, I mean, come on now. Only Democrats can question the results of an election. I can't with this chick. So listen to Jake Tapper. He actually asked her the question. He started off with it. He ends with it. It's number 5.
Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the person who won an adequate number of votes
but that's
to become the governor of
with all due respect, and I respect where you're coming from, and I respect the issues that you're raising, you're not answering the question. Do you think it was... You're not using the word legitimate. Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the legal governor of Georgia.
She would not say legitimate. And I think it's, you know, obviously she says she has some concerns with the process, and that she says that Republicans were disenfranchised. I haven't seen any Republicans say they were disenfranchised, but perhaps there were some problems with how things were done. But her refusal to say he's the legitimate governor, this is real. This is where she literally rips off the mask where she's a lawyer by training and she's just trying to make sure that no one else is disenfranchised. At the end, when she couldn't call him legitimate, she rips that mask off and shows us that really she's a sore loser. She's someone who, you know, regardless of the impact that it has on women who run after her, black women who run after her, black lawyers who run after her, you know, lawyers who run after her, anyone who runs after her as a Democrat, she leaves that stain of, well, he's not legitimate. 50,000 votes? What more does he need? I'm sorry, I know. He needs a stamp, a rubber stamp from Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I'm sorry, she's not in charge over there anymore. Tom Perez, Mr. Potty Mouth of America. We need a stamp. Kemp needs a stamp from the DNC. And if he doesn't have that, if he's not DNC approved, then of course he's not legitimate. And so her sore loser stench is going to hang around for other people to have to put up with, because she just can't go quietly into that good night now that she's lost. I mean, look how many other people have gotten pundit jobs. All those Bernie Sanders people, Simone Sanders, Mr. Harlan. There's a ton of people who, after Bernie Sanders lost the nomination, they went on to have viable careers in punditry, on cable news. They open businesses. They've run for other offices. They've worked on other campaigns. This is not the end of her life. Now, I know, let's face it. She was running, and there were a lot of people who thought she had it in the bag. Oprah was campaigning for her. They knew she was going to win. And so they'd already started treating her like she was the governor. They were already kowtowing and bowing and scraping to her, and she got a little taste of that power. And believe me, you only have to have someone kind of defer to you and basically, it's an acknowledgement that you're somebody. And that's a rush. That feels amazing. And so if you don't have people in your life to kind of bring you down and look, we've seen you at your worst. You're just a regular person. Don't get ahead of yourself. You don't have people in your life like that to make sure you don't lose your own head and get it inflated like a helium-filled balloon and start floating off into the stratosphere where you can't think and you can't see and you can't understand the reality that is everyday life. Because I don't care who you are. Donald Trump still has to go home to Melania Trump every night, and she's seen him at his worst. She's the grounding mark for him at home. He goes home, and I believe she's his biggest supporter, but she's also his wife. And that's our role as wives, is to support, but also to help ground. And for Stacey Abrams, her husband should be playing that role, but, who knows if he's able to, because maybe she's already floated away. But this is, in my opinion, embarrassing. I believe that if she carries on in this manner and doesn't let this go, this is going to become something that later in her life she will be extraordinarily embarrassed by, that she could not let this election go, that she could not acknowledge that she lost and go home to her own house and shut herself in for a few days and cry about it and punch a pillow and, drink hot tea, have the girls over, watch some stupid sappy movies and cry and let it go. Go home, read the cards and letters from supporters, smell the flowers and the bouquets, look at the small gifts and tokens from people who really wanted her to win, but she just didn't, and start to work through and grieve that loss. I lost the election. I'm not going to be the governor of Georgia this time, and go on with her life. She's going to regret it. Because if you don't do that, you get stunted. You basically stop right there. It's like you put a pin in it, but instead of saying, I'm going to go back to that and then move on, she's just stuck right there. And that's where she'll be. She'll be there, the failed gubernatorial candidate, constantly railing about elections and, how it just didn't work out. Kind of like Hillary, constantly talking about how white women in the suburbs failed her. This group failed her. Men failed her. Bill failed her. He didn't fail her. She's blamed everybody in the kitchen sink. She took a little bit of acknowledgement for herself, but not nearly enough. And she never went away. We haven't had a break from Hillary Clinton. And sad to say, it looks like we're not going to get a break from Stacey Abrams. It's a mistake. So we can all look at it ourselves. We can say, you know what? This isn't going to be me. Because losing is a part of life. It shouldn't be the only part of life, but it is definitely something that if you're going for anything, if you're doing anything that's a gamble, if you're taking outsized steps, you have the opportunity to fail. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's something about when you lose, you gave it your best effort. You did all that you could do and you lost. And so that's not what God had for you. But you do have the experience that you lost, that you can work through that experience and you can grow from it. And it makes you a better person. And then when you do win, because if you do it right, if you lose correctly, you set yourself up to win. And then when you go for it that next time, whether it's the same thing or whether it's something else, and you win, you're wiser. You know more. You're better for the loss. She's missing out on a great growth opportunity. But more than anything, let's just be real here. How tired are we of listening to her whine about this? As Americans, do we not have bigger fish to fry? She is going to constantly beat this dead horse forever because she lost? I just think it's pathetic, honestly. So we have just another couple of minutes here. I want to go over this information about the Californian agency that took 9 years to create the fire map. Now, this is one of those things where you just think to yourself, 9 years? So Governor Brown had vetoed a measure that tried to get this agency off the dime. Governor Jerry Brown is a California state agency charged with overseeing the utility companies. And they took 9 years to develop a consistent statewide map designating areas at high risk for destructive power line fires. Now, I know, at least directly about this here in our state because we had, it was kind of the opposite. We had like 9-10 years ago, might have been more, where we had a freezing snowstorm. And so all of the trees had, and you probably, if you remember this 9 or 10 years ago, you might have seen the pictures out of the Midwest all over social media. It was these pictures of trees without their leaves and everything because it's the middle of the winter, and they had a coating of ice on them, and it was gorgeous. Like all of these bare trees, the limbs coated with ice, and the ice is frozen, and then there's snow all over the ground. It was an ice storm of epic proportions. What wasn't great about it is that ice storm and those frozen branches that were connected to power lines meant that power lines froze and some of them snapped. Some of the trees actually fell over from the weight of the ice on their boughs and fell on power lines. And so there were, 40, 50,000 people without power. And it took a long time to get the power back up because it wasn't a matter of waiting for the ice to melt or something like that. It was literally snapped, broken power lines that had to be repaired, and it's freezing temperatures, and they didn't have enough crews to get the work done. After that, Ameren UE went on an extensive tree trimming like across the entire state. They started in the metro area, and they worked their way out. We've never had that happen again. We've had freezing storms, but we've never had it happen again. And I just got my notice. They're going to be out by my house trimming trees away from the power line, and they should be doing that in California to stop fires. But they're not. I wonder why. All right, if you're leaving us, God bless from the heartland. If you're sticking around, you got news and information from onenewsnow.com.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power. So businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith. So we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials. And it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowerment. Urban Family Talk. A ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm TP. The United Nations is condemning Russia's latest act of aggression. Simon Owen explains.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, accusing Russia of another reckless escalation.
It is an arrogant act that the international community must condemn and will never accept.
Russia is holding 3 Ukrainian Navy ships and their crews after seizing them in waters near Crimea, the region of Ukraine which Russia captured in 2014. The Russian ambassador saying the ships had illegally entered Russian waters in an effort by Ukraine's political leaders to provoke Russia. Simon Owen, Fox News.
The head of a Messianic Jewish ministry says President Trump made the right decision to not throw Saudi Arabia under the bus in the wake of the controversy over the apparent assassination of a Saudi journalist. Chad Groening has more.
Talking to reporters before boarding Marine One last week, President Trump made it clear that the United States has too much invested in Saudi Arabia to punish the country's government over the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul, Turkey last month. Jan Markell is founder and director of Olive Tree Ministries and host of Understanding the Times on American Family Radio.
Donald Trump is first and foremost a businessman, but beyond that, he's looking out for the interests of America and the free world. And he knows that if Saudi Arabia goes haywire, then the world's economy goes haywire, then all the stability goes haywire.
And Markell says the United States has been looking the other way in the past when it comes to the atrocities in Saudi Arabia.
Because we have to keep Saudi Arabia stable, and now they're an ally of Israel. And right now we've got a virtual peace treaty. It may not be on paper, but a virtual peace treaty between the Saudis and the Israelis. And that's far more important than dealing with this Khashoggi assassination, which is obvious. But why would we want to destabilize the world over one person? That's lunacy. So I'm totally behind the president and what he's doing.
I'm Chad Groening.
President Trump heads to Mississippi today for 2 campaign-style rallies that he hopes will give GOP candidate Cindy Hyde-Smith the push he needs to beat her opponent, Mike Espy. Campaign advisor to the president, Laura Trump, spoke on Fox and Friends today.
Listen, Mississippi is typically a red state, so I think we feel very good. The polls have reflected that she's going to win, but that does not mean anyone should stay home. You thought you were done on November 6th. You're not done. If you live in Mississippi, get out tomorrow and vote for Cindy.
An Oregon man pleads guilty to trying to bribe an ICE agent as part of a bitter divorce. Anna Wells explains.
The Portland man wanted his estranged wife and her daughter deported. Federal officials say 48-year-old Antonio Oswaldo Burgos met with an ICE officer in May and offered to pay him $3,000 to kick his wife out of the country. As part of a sting operation, the officer met with Burgos face-to-face, and he upped the price to $4,000 if the officer would also make sure her young daughter from another relationship was deported too. Burgos and his wife had met in El Salvador. They were in the process of getting a divorce. Burgos faces up to 15 years in prison if convicted. Anna Wells, Fox News.
The Food and Drug Administration plans to overhaul its system for approving new medical devices. Rachel Sutherland has more.
The FDA's decades-old system for approving medical devices has been criticized for failing to catch problems. Today, the administration announced changes aimed at making sure new medical devices reflect up-to-date safety and effectiveness features. The old system had generally allowed manufacturers to launch new products based on similarities to decades-old products rather than new clinical testing. The announcement comes after a probe led by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists analyzed more than 8 million device-related health records, including death and injury reports and recalls. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
General Motors will lay off 14,700 factory and white-collar workers in North America and put 5 plants up for possible closure as it restructures to cut losses and focus more on autonomous and electric vehicles. The reduction includes 8,100 white-collar workers. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
We just don't want to just hand out a box.
Franklin Graham of Samaritan's Purse shares the inspiration behind Operation Christmas Child's Discipleship Program, The Greatest Journey.
Children that put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we want them to grow in their faith. We want to disciple them.
Join Urban Family Talk Wednesday, December 5th to find out more about The Greatest Journey or visit SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Let me tell you what happens in most of the southern border is that in the middle of the night, a sensor goes off on a trail leading from Mexico to the United States, and a border patrol agent stands on that trail waiting to take that on. Doesn't know if it's an illegal alien for a job or a drug smuggler has a lot of guns. We've had border patrol agents killed on that border. While we slept last night and had dinner with our families and watched football, these brave men and women are on the border.
If we find that it's uncontrollable, Josh, if we find that it gets to a level where we are going to lose control or where people are going to start getting hurt, we will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control.
The entire border?
The whole border.
President Trump set to make 2 campaign stops in Mississippi today for Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith ahead of tomorrow's Senate runoff election. The president tweeting about Hyde-Smith, quote, "We need her in Washington." So what exactly is at stake in Mississippi?
Cindy has voted with me 100% of the time. She's always had my back. She's always had your back. And a vote for Cindy is a vote for me and make America great again.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here. This hour, we are going to be speaking with Jennifer Canales. She is an American missionary. She lives in Honduras, and she's going to talk to us about how this migrant caravan actually promotes anarchy in Honduras. I mean, Are you surprised by that? Probably not. And we're going to also get into a little bit of information on this Mississippi Senate runoff race. We're going to talk about what asylum is and isn't. Another jam-packed hour. Thanks for being here today. At Stacey on the Right on Twitter and Instagram, and StaceyOnTheRight.com. Okay, so let's get into it. Senator Graham says the Mississippi Senate runoff race is so important. Let's listen to that. It's number 2.
All right, how important is Mississippi? And then I got to roll. The Senate race.
If you care about judges, you care about tax cuts, you care about a strong military, vote for the Republican. The Democrats are going to take us backward, the Republican to keep us on track.
So he's pretty right about that. And I think a lot of people are getting sucked into this whole SB. There's like, oh, it's so historic. Yeah, what's historic about it? I've really, as I've you take things bit by bit and information kind of sinks into you. That's why I like to say that here on the show. Let that sink into you for a second. Let that marinate on your brain for a minute. Ever since I was reading that book, Adios America by Ann Coulter, ever since she came on the show and talked about what she means when she says we're one people group. And I know there's obviously we are all one flesh. We're one human race. There is no race of different races of people. We have different ethnic backgrounds based on where on the planet we hail from originally. But this idea that there's more than one type of human is so ridiculous. It's rooted in so much nonsense. But there's something really special about Americans, Black Americans and white Americans, and our shared history, our culture that has come out of the fact that our country was founded where slavery was legal. And there is so much of an important, it's a huge step that we have not yet undertaken on the whole. And so please don't email me that you've undertaken the step, or, I'm not judging anybody. This is not me smacking anybody on the wrist specifically. It's about overall, we have certain parts of our country that are really, people are obsessed with race. It's everywhere. It's everything they talk about. If you don't want to talk about it, then you hate yourself or you're a bigot or something like that. We also have a distinct group of individuals who have made themselves very prominent recently, who like to call the police on Black people whenever they're in public. And these incidences reinforce the idea that white people are racist. And it couldn't be further from the truth. If you find a group of nincompoops or, verifiable idiots, it doesn't mean that everyone who looks like them or sounds like them is also a nincompoop or verifiable idiot. There are going to be idiots in every group of people. But there is also a kind of reticence to have a conversation or to talk about how things how things crack out for certain people. And as much as I talk about, because I'm a child of the king, the permanent tan doesn't determine where I'm going to spend eternity. What determines that is if I decide I'm going to serve, who's my master? Who am I going to serve? I choose to serve God. So I can put the petty slights and inconveniences behind me, but it doesn't mean I don't experience them. It happens to me just like any other Black person. It also happens to white people. They experience petty inconveniences and slights as well. So it's not unique to any one race, but or ethnic background, I should say. It's not unique to any one ethnic background. But there is a kind of, it's like a dismissal of the concerns of people who they want to talk about it. Now, no one has to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about something, you don't have to. But we have to find a way to stretch out over the chasm that has developed, mainly at the insistence of the left on refusing to let go of race as the predetermining factor, the number one indicator of whether or not you can be successful. We have to get away from that, and we have to say, look, we're Americans, and we've got to find a way to get along. It's similar to what you do with family. We don't get to pick our family. So all of us have people in our family that we're like, oh man, okay, here we go. All of us have someone in our family who feels that way about us. Oh, yes. Yeah. So that being the case, we just choose to get along with each other because what we say to ourselves is, well, that's my family. That's my people. She's just going to be what she's going to be. He's just going to act how he's going to act. I just keep praying for him, but I'm still going to see him at Thanksgiving. I'm still going to see him this weekend. I'm still going to, they're still going to come stay at my house, whatever. We got to start extending that out to our American family. What I find so interesting about the whole phenomenon of Americans not getting along together based on ethnic background is that so many other people, namely Salvadorans, Hondurans, people like that, they're dying to get in here. If this country was so horrifyingly racist, then brown people would not want to come here. I mean, you know that. No amount of money could make America a good place to live in if racism was as rampant as the left would have us believe, which means that it's a smokescreen. It's something that's put up to make us, it's like, hey, look over here, shiny thing over here, look, pay attention to this. So you don't pay attention to the overspending, the administrative state that our first guest was talking about, the people who aren't doing their jobs, like the government agencies that are supposed to create these fire maps, and PG&E is supposed to do something about these power lines that are encroached upon by vegetation that is dry like kindling and snaps off, catches fire, and then, you got just whole towns burned to the ground, wiped off the face of the map. I keep meeting people who either used to live in Paradise, California, or they have friends who used to live there, like recently, who don't live there anymore now because it's literally not there anymore. And they keep saying how they're like, I can't believe it's not there. That's where we got married. That's where it's an amazing thing for them to be kind of recounting this, and for us to know that these are things that have happened that didn't have to occur. So we've got to move past this idea. People are going to be rude. People are going to be mean. But for every one of those times, I've just been noticing how often people are, saying hello, how much more people seem to be going out of their way to. I don't know. Are we back? Okay, awesome. All right. I believe we're back. Okay. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. What's your identity? Secularists insist that one should find their identity in who they choose to have sex with, or by checking a demographic box and assuming a mantle of victimhood. But God looks at the heart. His word only offers two designations upon which to rest our identity. According to the Bible, our character is predicated, founded, grounded, and built upon whom we serve, God or Satan. There is no middle ground, no safe zone where one can say, I'm an independent, and escape judgment. 1 John 1:10 is clear. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. Instead of trying to occupy a middle ground that simply does not exist, choose to serve God. It's time to make a decision about our identity by asking one question: who do I serve? I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at Stacey. Okay, are we back? Can people hear that? Okay, so we're back. I have no idea what I was talking about before we went off to the break, but I want to get to, in fact, we just have a couple of minutes left in this segment. Weird live radio stuff, you guys. Have no idea what's going on. So the deportation of the illegal immigrants who are trying to come into the country, and they stormed the border. So I want to get to that. And we're going to have Jennifer Zilli Canales up after this break. But right now, let's get to this here. So the BBC reported, and this was on November 25th, so yesterday, the BBC reported that the breaking news Mexico's Interior Ministry is doing, they're going to deport every member of the migrant caravan who are identified as having tried to cross the U.S. border illegally. Now, this is something that helps President Trump because, remember, some crazy, whacked-out Ninth Circuit court judge actually did this. It's kind of an interesting thing. They said, look, you can't say that someone who comes into the country illegally can't file for asylum. Now, I don't know why he wouldn't be able to make that designation. I believe they're appealing that to the Supreme Court. But in any case, what matters is that they've ruled against him and they've placed this injunction, which if I were him, I would ignore it. what could it possibly hurt to ignore an injunction by the Ninth Circuit? They don't actually have jurisdiction over him as a single circuit court, the court that liberals always go to. So anyway, the Mexican government is now saying that they're going to do this thing, this amazing thing, which is deporting people who are coming into the country and they're storming the U.S. border while the U.S. border is being, basically manned by our troops. So this is from the Ministry of the Interior website, and the information was translated by Google. The Ministry of the Interior informs that in coordination with local authorities from the state of Baja California, they managed to contain the group of almost 500 migrants who, in a violent way, tried to cross the border of Mexico with the United States in El Chaparral, Tijuana. This dependence reiterates that through the National Institute of Migration, we will proceed to deport immediately fully identified people who participated in these violent acts. Also, he points out that the acts of provocation, far from helping their goals, threaten the migratory legal framework and can result in a serious incident on the borderline. So they say there's no understanding between our governments, but they're actually starting to do what they're supposed to do. Good for them. They want to keep shipping cars into the U.S., they better do something. All right, when we get back, we're going to have Jennifer Canales. She's actually an American missionary in Honduras. Stay there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call *** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call *** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
When the presidents of France and the United States were together earlier this month to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, French President Macron decided to criticize President Trump's use of the term nationalism. President Macron argued that nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism because it will actually erase what a nation holds dearest, its moral values. Senator Marco Rubio responded to that claim in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. He believes that the French president got everything exactly backwards. He said it is through the nation that moral values can be upheld and sustained in America. Our ideals are deeply entwined with our national traditions and institutions. Senator Rubio went on to explain that what makes America exceptional is that our values are built into our national identity. While we have never been completely true to our founding ideas, for more than 2 centuries, each generation has fought and succeeded to move us closer to them. He also quoted from President Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of a united American spirit in his first inaugural address. He said, "The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched as surely as they will be by the better angels of our nature." Critics of President Trump want to remind us of the negative connotations of the word nationalism. That is certainly true as well. However, I appreciate the fact that Senator Rubio wants to remind us of the importance of national pride and patriotism, especially in a country that is defined more by its ideas than by any ethnic or religious cohesion. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. While we're working on getting our guest, I want to continue. I've just kind of got cut off a little bit. We had all those problems in our first segment. So in this ministry website posting where the National Institute of Migration basically laid out that they're not going to allow violence inside of their city while people are waiting for an opportunity to come to the U.S. And there's also been, I don't know if you guys saw, there was a big, huge demonstration. Tear gas was fired. They had the women and the children at the front, and they were unable to, the people were unable to get in, and they got some really good pictures for the lamestream media so they could try to act as if the Trump administration is doing something horrible, when the reality is they send the women and the children up front, and then they immediately disperse the men. And the men are the ones who are coming for work. They're not even planning on applying for asylum. The MSNBC, which is what's so fascinating, is MSNBC has actually put forward some information saying that that they're doing this work. They're saying that they're doing this work. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here. Do we actually have Cassie Smedel from the RNC holding? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I love Cassie. Let's talk to Cassie Smedel from the RNC national spokesperson. Cassie. So my call screening software, everything's messed up over here. I had this weird segment where all my stuff's going haywire. And then when I saw the call screen software pop up on my computer here, I'm talking and I look up and it says Cassie Smedel. I'm like, oh, awesome. Wait, can that be right? So hello.
Well, funny because I'm calling you from, I got a snow day home here in Kansas City, so I'm still in Missouri, so I thought maybe I had my time wrong because of the time change. So I'm glad I feel closer to you today.
You are closer to me. Well, let's see. Yeah, you're definitely closer because if you're in Kansas City, you are just like 3.5 hours by car. Maybe not today since the weather's so bad, but you guys got a ton of snow. I have a girlfriend who lives in Kansas City also on the Missouri side. And she said they got 6 inches last night. Is that so?
Oh, at least that much. We are fully covered on the grass and then some. So it's like a winter wonderland. It's really fun.
I bet you it's gorgeous. But that means you're going nowhere. Like, are you planning on going back to D.C. or New York, or are you just hanging out?
Well, yeah, I was supposed to leave yesterday to go to D.C. and call the day before when they said, oh, snow might be coming. And they said, oh, you can stay an extra day if you want, because they did close the airport yesterday, but it's open today. So I'm heading back in just a couple of hours.
Okay. Well, safe travels on that. I know how it is to try to fly out of the Midwest to D.C. when it's bad weather. It's usually fine leaving, but when you come down out of the clouds in D.C., it gets really bumpy if the weather is bad. So I hope you have a nice, smooth flight.
Oh. Well, I'll bring my extra gum to pop my ears.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about, I'm hoping you have, first off, I want to discuss this race in Mississippi. This is like a really big deal because the Mike Espy, he's trying to act like he's a regular Mississippian guy and like he's just like not a hardcore leftist, but he really is. And then the Republican has had a coordinated campaign of smear tactics like launched against her, all kinds of stuff that like she couldn't have had any say in what school she went to as a child. And we don't know what reason she sent her child to a certain school or not to a certain school. As a parent, I know there are so many things that go into play into where we choose to put our kids, and especially for private school. So I don't know if this is sticking. I'm hoping people are ignoring this stuff.
Right. Well, one thing we know about Mike Espy is that the biggest funder of his campaign is George Soros. So when you start talking about the smear campaign and how all of these things seem to be coming out at coincidental timing in a coincidental way, and then you come to find out that his biggest backer is George Soros, it all starts to make sense. This is what he does, right? He goes in and tries to conjure up drama. But then for Cindy Hyde-Smith, she's been a fantastic ally of President Trump, and of course, to maintain that seat in Mississippi with being a good, strong majority for the president and Republicans in the Senate. That's why it's important. And what we're seeing here is this is a runoff, so the whole country is focused on it because it's the only show in town. Mm-hmm. But in every poll, she's been ahead. She's been focusing her race on Mississippi and on Mississippians, as she should. She's not paying any attention to the national media because she knows they're not in it for her. And I think that's what it is that this determination to focus on Mississippians and Mississippi values and being a good representative for Mississippi. You know, Mike Espy, when he was a member of Congress, he voted with Nancy Pelosi. So we know, despite his best attempts to say that he's going to be some kind of moderate, we know that's not the case when you're backed by George Soros and the voting record says you vote with Nancy Pelosi. We know he'll be a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer. And, I mean, he was too liberal for the Clintons. He was the ag secretary under President Clinton, and he had not too liberal, I'm sorry, too scandalous. He had some scandals, and he had to resign as ag secretary. So he is not a level-headed, good representative for Mississippi. He's going to bring drama and be a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer.
And when we talk about the 53-seat majority, so really we had the majority last go-round, right, for the past couple of years. We had 51, but 2 of them were the swing voters who they weren't reliable. They weren't reliable for the president, although one of them did, Collins. She came through in the end for the Kavanaugh vote. But for the most part, the 2 of them, the one from Alaska, Murkowski, and Collins, they're not, sure, they're Republicans, but they're not the ones we count on when we need to get something through. So 53 means those 2 could defect and we would still be good to go.
That's right. That's a really important cushion there. And also, one thing I like to point out, Bob Corker, who's the outgoing senator from Tennessee, he didn't run for re-election. He was also someone that would kind of be a little bit of a thorn in the president's side. And now you've got Marsha Blackburn, who is a staunch ally and supporter of the president and of his agenda. So he's getting not just a widened Republican majority, but a stronger majority of allies that really want to help usher through this Trump agenda, which is what so many of us voted for, and we've been so happy with these promises made and promises kept. And this gives us and the president more of an opportunity to keep more promises.
So one of the things that I'm also paying close attention to is what's going on down at the southern border. And you and I have discussed this so many times before when you've joined us on the program. And my concern is that the president wants to do some amazing things for this country, but the southern border it's almost like it's being used as a wedge issue to derail good things that the president has already accomplished and things that he would be working on if it weren't for this. It's just an insidious problem. Now, I think he's handling it as best as he can, but what can we kind of expect moving forward, especially since I love it. He said he may shut the border down permanently. Cassie, that's an awesome idea. I know other people wouldn't agree with me, but I, for one, would be like, do it, President Trump. What else can we expect?
Well, that's right. What he's saying is we've been having this border issue, or immigration issue, I should say, for 25 years and then some. I mean, we're going back to President Reagan. So what he's saying now is we've got to get a handle on this. And every other thing we've tried, they continue to take advantage of the loopholes and of the compassion and generosity of the American people. So we're going to shut it down if need be so we can get a handle on this process and figure out not just who's coming in and out of our country, but who should be coming into our country and out of our country. And so I appreciate that we have a leader in the White House who's taking a firm position, because that is the priority of the president, to protect our sovereign borders and to protect the people. So I appreciate that. And what we're seeing on the border, it's not a laughing matter, but remember when Democrats said that the president was playing up the caravan issues for the election and that we wouldn't hear anything about it once election day came? Or they'd say, that caravan, they're 4 months away. Why is he talking about this? It's all politics. And lo and behold, we're less than a month out from the election, and here they are at our border throwing rocks and fecal matter and rushing our agents, our Border Patrol agents. It's really quite a sight down there, and we should be using our every resource and tool and person at our disposal to protect the border. And so I think to your point, we've got just a couple weeks here until Congress potentially is going to shut down the government if they can't reach a spending deal. And the president wants, as part of any spending deal, money for that wall. And there are those who say, well, he's not going to get it because Democrats are about ready to take the majority in the House and they have no incentive to work for him. But let that chaos that you're seeing on the border and those people who you so rightly set it up, that they put the women and children in front and then the men run around them. And you see what they are doing. And the bad is taking advantage of the good. And so something has to be done. Democrats cannot continue to make this a political wedge issue. They need to see it for the issue that it is, and that is our right to protect our borders and protect our people.
I just, you know what, Cassie, I've gotten a little pessimistic about what Democrats can and cannot comprehend. And I really think for them, I kind of tied into news that came out, I think it was last week or the week before at the end of the week, where the Census Bureau has actually pulled back on talking about when the white population in America will become the majority minority, because they found that the exposure to that information actually makes white Americans upset and less likely to be open to open-ended immigration, illegal immigration, et cetera, because the change is not occurring naturally. The change in who we are as Americans and the size of our different groups of people that are tracked by the government is actually being fomented, starting with Ted Kennedy, moving forward to today's radicalized Democrats with this open border scheme. It's not just illegal immigration, it's legal immigration at well over 1 million a year, and then refugees and visa overstays. And so if you couple all of that together, our country is being changed by a small select group of people against the wishes of the greater population. Even lawful immigrants who are Hispanic background don't want to see hordes of illegal immigrants coming into the country after they paid $50,000 or whatever and waited 10 years to get in here lawfully. It's a huge problem. And so, I see what you're saying, and I hope it's true. But part of me really, the Census Bureau report, in it, the officials who put it together said it's not their job to alert Americans to huge demographic shifts, but they're also, they saw a kind of triumphalism in Democrats when they shared this information with Democratic leaders. It was like, yeah, and when we are a majority brown country, those brown people are going to give elections to the Democrats, bar none. They're just going to keep giving it to us, and we're going to win. That kind of attitude isn't good for America. That we need an American populace. I don't care what permanent tan people are wearing. We have to have people here who are Americans first, so that they want to maintain what we have, so we don't turn into Honduras or El Salvador, et cetera.
Right, absolutely. It's not so much what we look like, but what do we do as a country? What do we stand for as a country and as our citizens? And when Democrats love to say we're a nation of immigrants, that's right. But it's a nation of, my grandparents came here for this American dream, for work, to provide for their families, and it didn't cross their minds to not come here and go through the process to become American citizens. That has been a shift in saying, come over here first, and then we'll figure out how to get you paperwork so that you can vote, as you're talking about. And so often they say, we just want you to vote. We want you to vote. And not so much, what do you stand for? What is your American dream? What are you contributing to our country, and what will the country contribute to you? That is a shift in conversation that I think is ultimately bad for us as a country. It's not about people wanting to come to our country, become citizens, contribute to our economy and to our culture in positive ways. Those are all things that we stand for and we believe in. But this idea that we would first prioritize those who come here illegally over those who desire to come here legally and become American citizens, that's this philosophical difference that's becoming so apparent between Republican and Democrat, quite frankly.
It is. And, I keep thinking about, I was in Nashville a bit ago, and it was like 2 weeks ago. I went to Nashville to do an interview, and my Uber driver was this awesome guy. He still had a little bit of an accent, and I'm not sure what Latin American country he was immigrated from, but he was my Uber driver. And he had, Cassie, I'm not kidding, he had a football field of Legos, and it was attached to the dashboard, and the Legos were the team, the football team in Nashville. That's his team. And then the whoever they were playing, I guess it's their number one rivals. And then he had a bobblehead of his favorite quarterback for the Nashville team. That was in the center of the dash. So I get in, and he's like, Bonita, where are we headed? And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we just smiled, and we chatted all the way from, he picked me up from the interview location and drove me to the airport. We had such a good time talking. It has nothing to do with anybody being from South America or wherever. It has to do with people being here because they love this country and they came here legally. And I've never met someone who was, an immigrant that I was like, well, that's a horrible idea. I've never met an immigrant that I didn't like that person. Or never. I've never been afraid of immigrants. And I know, just based on so many people that I know who happen to be white, I'm not unique. Most people don't care where you're from. You're working, I'm working, we're just here. It just makes me kind of sad that the Democrats have such a lock on the conversation about this. But I am so glad that we were able to have you on the show today. And we're going to talk to you again soon. You stay safe on your trip back to D.C. tonight.
Thank you so much. It was great to be with you. And one shout out for any of your listeners. Vote.gop to find your polling location if you don't know where it is already, because we need everybody to get out and vote tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cassie, for joining the show today. All right, we are going to be back with more right after this. Stay there.
Life is never picture perfect. Human beings come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. No matter how much we plan, no matter how much we think we're prepared, the unplanned happens all the time. It's how we respond to the unexpected that shows our true humanity. But many do not see the value of every human life. Too many are willing to discard those who don't fit the picture of perfection. Abortion destroys the chance to love and to be loved. We never know what will fill the frames of our lives, or how empty those frames can be when we allow exceptions.
Every life is a gift.
Learn more at www.radiance.life.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called Tune In. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
Wesley Biblical Seminary, on campus in Jackson, Mississippi, online with live face-to-face video classrooms. Hello, I'm John Nyhoff, the president of Wesley Biblical Seminary. Let us provide you with excellence in biblical and theological graduate education. International, nationwide, interdenominational, conservative, biblical. The world is our campus. Wesley Biblical Seminary.
Donald Trump's America.
We have a very strong ally.
President Trump continues to get some criticism for supporting Saudi Arabia over what intelligence officials say about the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and any Saudi involvement. Democratic Representative Elijah Cummings on NBC's Meet the Press says Congress will look at the alliance, including a key constitutional check of the White House.
The emoluments clause, and wondering whether the president
is acting in his best interests or those of the American people.
Congress also wants to look at military involvement with the caravan. Maine Independent Senator Angus King said on CBS Face the Nation that he has questions about troops on the border.
Not only what the rule is, what the rules of engagement are that the Defense Department has used. Also, I want to know how much this is costing.
And President Trump back on the campaign trail today, traveling to Mississippi for a roundtable discussion and a rally ahead of an important Senate runoff election tomorrow. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It's close, but nevertheless, when you combine what the two Republicans won prior to the runoff, it was 58% of the vote. So I do believe Cindy Hyde-Smith will win this. We don't take any seat for granted, but come November 27th, I believe Cindy Hyde-Smith will continue to be the senator from Mississippi. It's a big race. It's important, and it's key to securing our 53-seat majority there in the Senate.
Absolutely. And I got to say, Cassie was dead on. It's a clear choice here. You have a clear choice. One person is interested in obstruction and open borders and, judges who feel the Constitution is a living, breathing document, like something you'd find on Dora the Explorer. And then you have the Republican candidate who is interested in restoring constitutionally limited these judges. These judges are important because if we have a living, breathing document, that means nothing that you believe is your right now is your right, because at any time that living, breathing document can change, and then you've got whatever the person who's changing it thinks you've got. I prefer to stick with what we had originally. What we have now, what we're working with now, it's the only one of its kind on the face of this planet. And we need to preserve it. Sometimes you can look back and you're like, I had it so good. I didn't realize I had it so good, but you had it good. But you can't see that until later. I don't want that to be the case here in America, where we're looking back and saying, remember when we actually, we had people who knew what the Constitution was? A lot of millennials have no idea what's in it. And the ones behind them, that's the ones we can still catch. You still have teenagers at home? Have them take that test at Hillsdale College. Find out what they think is in the Constitution. And it's a free course you can take at home online. Instead of them looking at YouTube videos, they can take this course, work on it a little bit each night. And before you know it, it's over. It's just a few weeks long. And they'll have a full reckoning of what the Constitution says. And you'll find that they say, oh, I didn't know that, or, I didn't realize that. Now, if your kids are already in a school that teaches the Constitution, then there's other classes that go beyond that on Hillsdale College's website. But it's not so much about you having to take a class. Maybe you just get your pocket Constitution out and read it. I mean, use whatever mechanism works for you. But we've got to make sure that when our kids leave the house, number one, that they're biblically literate. They have a biblical worldview, and that they know Jesus Christ is their Savior. That's the first thing. Then, once you got that, I mean, come on. You should have been working on making sure they know what's in the Constitution as they're working their way through grade school and middle school and then into high school. But if you haven't, or if you're just becoming aware of that the curriculum at your kid's school is not up to snuff, it's your job as a parent to fill that gap. And we all do this. We all have come to a place where one of your kids is like, I'm struggling in this subject. And you realize that there's some gaps in the learning, and then you immediately move to rectify that. There should be no gaps in the biblical knowledge, in the biblical worldview, or in the knowledge of the Constitution. And there's so many other things you're gonna want your kid to know. One thing I recommend is for people to early on, unless your child is artistically or politically minded, to engender in them a love of the science, technology, engineering, and math. Engender a love of those subjects in your children. Starting early on, introduce it. If they're in middle school, introduce it now. You'd be amazed at how fascinated they can become with those disciplines. And those are the disciplines that have jobs that endure. They're professions, something that you will never, ever not have a place for engineers. I don't care how many robots we stand up and put in different roles, you're still going to need someone to engineer those puppies. and the other portions of engineering, because engineering has 16 disciplines. There's so much to it. So now I want to turn to a little bit of culture. And I am just like, it is amazing to me that Twitter as a platform is still doing as well as it is. But here's a latest case of them pushing someone out. So this woman, she's a feminist now. Okay. So she, she's hardly a right winger, but okay. She has been kicked off of Twitter. Her name's Megan Murphy. She's at Megan E. Murphy, or she was on Twitter. She is on there tweeting from Australia about this transgendered man who has made it his life's work to shut down rape treatment centers for women. You heard that right. Rape treatment centers for women, where, clearly the name describes what's going on. So here's the tweet she sent out. She says she got a message from Twitter saying that she'd violated their rules, and the rules against promoting violence against, threatening, harassing other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. For the record, this dominatrix was also one of those behind the push to get BCFED to boycott and defund the Vancouver Rape Relief, Canada's longest standing rape crisis center. I'm sorry, I said Australia, Canada. No, those are not close to each other. He is actively working to take away women's services and harm the feminist movement. So she's calling this guy out, trying to bring attention to what he's doing because it's not helping women. She says, so at BlogHer pulled revenue from a feminist site because a white man who spends his energy promoting the sex trade as empowering for women and targeting and trying to silence and defund women's shelters, female activists, and feminist media told them to. This is Lisa Crute at Lisping Lisa, the male BDSMer who was given a platform to promote prostitution at the Vancouver Women's March this year. So the Vancouver Women's March people gave this transgendered man a platform to speak to other women promoting prostitution, which we all know degrades women and is a form of slavery. So he then went on to lead efforts to defund Vancouver's rape relief and women's shelter, and she's calling him out. Well, then after she calls him out, they ban her. She says, there's the quote from her. What's insane to me, though, is that while Twitter knowingly permits graphic pornography and death threats on the platform, I've reported countless violence threats, the vast majority of which have gone unaddressed. They won't allow me to state very basic facts, such as one of the things she tweeted out, men aren't women. Now, this is the world that we're currently occupying because we have just abdicated our responsibility to elect and promote people who have a biblical worldview. They're too boring. They just don't, they're not cool. They're not the one we want. We want someone edgy. We want someone who understands that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's something basic. That's something that if you talk to kids about it, like if you ask a kid, like a 5-year-old, if you said, hey, can a man be a woman? They'd laugh. Kids laugh at those kind of questions because they know that's just silliness. They'll say, no, that's not. No, because they know that, an apple is an apple. Can an apple be an orange? No. An apple is an apple, an orange is an orange. They know that. Yet we go from there to where we are now, where if you say a woman can't be a man or men aren't women, you're banned. You got to get off Twitter. So here's the rest of her quote. She says, this is hardly an abhorrent thing to say, nor should it be considered hateful to ask questions about the notion that people can change sex or ask for explanations about transgender ideology. These are now, like it or not, public debates that are impacting people's lives as legislation and policy are being imposed based on gender identity ideology. So on Twitter, she regularly engaged in these kinds of debates. She talked about sex, gender, women's studies. She holds a master's degree in the field of women's studies from Simon Fraser University. So she's not a stupid troll. She's an educated, opinionated woman seeking to use her Twitter platform to develop her understanding of the topics and engage others in the debate. She says back in August, she was locked out for the first time. She was told that she'd violated the Twitter rules against hateful conduct, and she had to delete 4 tweets in order to get reinstated. In this case, the tweets in question were about this transgendered male. Now, Twitter didn't care that she had a good reason to call him out. Twitter didn't care that she was trying to defend women who've been harmed, women who need help and assistance, who this transgendered man is trying to hurt them. Twitter didn't care about that. Now, there's something called, and listener, I know, but we have to know these things because we live in this world. There's something called dead naming. Dead naming is when you refer to a trans person by their legal name or their birth name. So apparently she dead named this guy, and that was also a part of why she was banned. Here's this Karina Cohn saying that on its face, dead naming is merely mentioning the christened name of a person given by their parents if that person has subsequently changed their name. So Murphy went on to describe in her timeline of how she was eventually booted from Twitter that she deleted the tweets in question, then publicly complained on Twitter saying, "Hi at Twitter, I'm a journalist. Am I no longer permitted to report facts on your platform?" As soon as she tweeted that, she was locked out of her account again, told she had to delete that tweet, and she was suspended for 12 hours. She appealed the suspension as it seemed clear to her that the tweets weren't hateful, but simply stated the truth. Twitter did not respond. She says her account was locked again on November 15th. She had to delete tweets that read, "Women aren't men. How are trans women not men? What is the difference between a man and a trans woman?" She deleted the tweets to regain access to her account, but she was ticked off by this time. And she tweeted, some spicy rhetoric to @Twitter. "I'm not allowed to say that men aren't women or ask questions about the notion of transgenderism at all anymore. That a multi-billion-dollar company is censoring basic facts and silencing people who ask questions about this dogma is insane." The tweet went viral, garnering 20,000 likes, and they locked her out again. They demanded that she delete that viral tweet, and then they banned her permanently. So when we talk about freedom of expression, neutral public platform, and all of this other stuff, Twitter is none of those things. And what's really insane about it is that if you have any kind of following on there at all, it means you spent hours and hours and hours of your personal time tweeting and building that following. And at any moment, they can take it away from you for simply tweeting out the truth. I think what people should do is, if you have a Twitter account, everyone should tweet identical to what she tweeted out. Let me tell you again what the one that really got them ticked off at her. "Women aren't men." Millions of Americans should just tweet out, it's 3 words. "Women aren't men." See what happens. Are they going to ban everybody? Who would be left? Just the liberals. Now, liberals do comprise the majority of the people who use Twitter. That's true. But they wouldn't have any fun just tweeting at themselves. The whole idea behind Twitter is that you're engaging in debates with people online and you're uncovering hard truths. That's not something you can do if you can't tweet out something that's simply true, which is that men aren't women. That's the point. Well, what would you do if you woke up and you're married to a man, you're a woman, you're married to a man, and you woke up and he was a woman? I mean, this has happened to people because they transgender themselves and they break up their marriages. But can you imagine if all over the country tomorrow, every woman who was married to a man woke up married to a woman, and there were only women in the entire country? The children were or girls and boys, but all of the grown men were replaced with women. Can you imagine how enraged most of us would be? There is no way I would ever want to be married to a woman. Like, you guys know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure men feel the same way. They wouldn't want to be married to a man. So the idea that a woman can't be a man and a man can't be a woman is obviously something that still exists, because fully half of the country that is married are married to people of the opposite sex. I mean, this stuff just doesn't get more true than that. So she was banned simply for repeating repeatedly pointing out that men can't be transformed into women simply because they want to be called women. It's a fact at best, an opinion at worst, and the fact that she refused to bow down is the reason why they pushed her out. Now, we know Twitter's a private company and they can do whatever they want, but is this what we should be supporting? Is this what Americans should have as our sole option for viral, communications online? We're so used to calling them tweets and all that, but should there not be another platform? Should there not be another way to get a debate going, to get into a discussion, to maybe just push information out there for other people to consume and give feedback? There are other ways, and we're going to be exploring that more. All right, Monday. We had a little bit of rockiness in that first segment of the second hour, but God is good. We're still around, and we'll be around for you tomorrow as well on Tuesday. So God bless. Good evening from the Heartland. Talk to you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rim.